Hello and welcome to another lighting diagram lesson. My name is Trenton Hoshiko, and today we are talking about the Red Room Etretat by Vallotton. And today we are talking about the Red Room Etretat by Vallotton. This is a really striking image that I've been excited to talk about for quite a while now. Before we get started, if you want to make your own lighting diagrams, either for your own images, your own plans, how you're going to set up a shot, or to break down images in this kind of way, I have a Filmmaker Tools template for Draw.io. It's available completely free on my Patreon. I have a link down in the video description to that download directly. While you're there, if you want to join as a free member or as a paid member for as little as $2, I'd love to have you. My current goal is to reach 100 total free members and paid members, and every little bit helps. And I really appreciate everybody who's already gone over there and joined. Thank you so much for your support. Draw.io itself can be found at diagrams.net. It is a free and open source diagram software that I think is really useful for diagramming for filmmaking. Let's just talk about the image first here. Now, usually I use red circles, but I think that might be a little bit more difficult this time. So let's go with a green circle. So immediately right off the bat, the red here is just incredible. We have the burgundy of her dress, the red of the chair, the red couch, the red walls, and we even have some red reflections up here in this mirror, as well as the kind of pinkish red of the carpet. And even this wood is kind of a reddish tone. So just really, there is so much vibrant red here. It's really rich and I love it. And then that is contrasted with the blacks, the white patterning here, and this kind of goldish tan color as well. And then the skin tones of both her and the child, skin tone, hair tone, all mixed together there. And then not to mention, there is a lot of light reflecting around in this room between the mirror itself and also this shiny black surface and the wood floors, which seem to be polished and shiny as well. So there's just a lot of light kind of happening in this room. And the brush style and the kind of fidelity of it is not incredibly precise. Everything is kind of actually shapes if you really go in here and look at it. And that can be said for most paintings, but it's a little bit more apparent here that these are kind of just shapes. And even if we look at the child here, the shape of like the pink cloak here is very ambiguous, honestly. Almost as ambiguous as like her legs in this dress. Now, when we start looking at this, the first thing that I notice besides the red is that her face has a split to it. It's basically a little bit more than a half split. We have a little bit of a Rembrandt triangle on the other side here that we're going to need to replicate. And we have a lot of contrast. This image is very contrasty, and it runs a lot of tones because it has these whites, these blacks, and then all of the reds in here as well. And we have these shadows that do have some detail and some blocked out areas. But back to her face, we are getting exposure on her right side, which is our camera left, and we are getting less exposure on her left side, our camera right, but we are getting that nose shadow right there to help make that Rembrandt triangle. Speaking of shadows, we have a shadow under her arm, meaning which usually indicates that the light is coming kind of top down. And we also have shadows on her legs on what we would call the front. That's kind of what's facing the camera most, which is being blocked by this edge of the fabric. So the light is coming left to right and not bending around her legs all that much. It does wrap around her face just a little bit, especially because you have that Rembrandt triangle, but we will talk about that more in a minute. Other shadows include this back here, which is the shadow from this mantelpiece where the mirror is hanging and the fireplace is. And that shadow is kind of interesting to me. As I've been prepping for this video and working on how to recreate this shadow right here is a little bit longer than her shadow behind her. So I think that there's a little bit of, artist interpretation and trickery even here, where her shadow is a little bit more like she was lit in line with the camera. It's kind of going straight back behind her, whereas this line up here is more if the lighting is coming from further to the left of the camera, which, is kind of how her face is lit actually as well. So I think there's a little bit of manipulation here because of where her shadow is versus where this shadow is. It's not a huge difference, and we're going to kind of just work with it as best as possible. But I think it is important to note. Now, one of the big things that we're looking for here is to get separation on the couch back here from the walls. We need to be able to have that so that we don't just have a big red lumpy mess. I think that one of the aspects of this painting that is, unique is how much red there is, and it doesn't just get lost in itself. The other thing that we can note, just, in terms of where the lighting is positioned, is the right side of the chair here has these kind of catch lights, and we can see that it's coming left to right because of where that catch light is positioned. And just overall, the child has a shadowed face where they also have a lit back. So now let's talk about building out the room. I'm going to use my floor plan tools like normal. I angled the couch because it kind of looks like it's at an angle. I'm not quite sure. It's not quite clear because of the kind of sketchier nature of this, but we're going to just put it as such, I think, and it will be fine. So this is our kind of basic room shape here. I guess we should add the lady in. I'm not going to bother with the child. I think that kind of complicates things without adding anything more for us to really learn from. Now our camera is going to make sure that we have the corner right here on the right third, and we're going to have her on the left third is the goal. So if we kind of place it something like, I would say that this is a relatively normal lens. Most paintings I find are pretty normal lenses, especially paintings that were before the major popularity of cameras. Even ones that would have used like a camera obscura or a camera lucida generally still have more of a normal lens type perspective, although there you get some more of like the depth of field and those kinds of things. But in this case, I am going to say that this is a relatively normal lens, somewhere between a 45 to 65 probably is where I would put this. So I'm just going to rotate the whole thing real quick here. I think it'll make the spacing for the lighting make a little bit more sense, but yeah, this has some interesting angles in it, so I built it the other way at first. I'm imagining that this light very easily could be coming from a window in particular, so I'm going to light, kind of that way. How I would start is just with a lamp. And there's a few different approaches that we could have here. I note that also the light kind of falls off around here. There's a sort of a semicircular, a sort of circular shape where the light sort of starts falling off, and so we get a little bit of a darker edge on the top right here. So if I put a light like this and then I use an octabox, we are trying to control the light so that it only lands on the left side of our subject here, our camera left of the subject, and her right side of the right side of her face, and just have kind of minimal wrapping. Now the octabox is to soften it just a little bit and to give a little bit of that sort of circular shape to it. So the shadows here are not incredibly hard. They're also not that soft of an edge. So I'm using an octabox and I'm scooting it further back to kind of play in between those two. The octabox helps also spread the light further, and so that we get complete coverage of this area. So that would be something generally that looks like this. Now, there's a couple different things we can do here because I'm using the octabox to spread the light more. You could just use a hood. Now the hood will make these harsher shadows, maybe even have double shadows depending on what kind of hood you're using. But you also will still get a little bit of that kind of fall off here. Now this fall off is subtle. So that's why I was thinking using a smaller octabox a little bit further back gives you kind of an in-between point. Now, the important thing is that we do also want to move this over somewhat so that when her knee is up like this, the far side of it is getting blocked from that light. Just, you can imagine a little carve out here where there wouldn't be that light hitting it because of where her leg would be. That's important. Now, you'll note that this is where that shadow manipulation kind of comes in, because the angle here would mean that the shadow was casting right behind her and kind of into this area right here. But it's not. It's a little bit further behind her, as if it was more lit from the right or towards where the camera is. But the shadow up here is in line with where it would fall, kind of like this diagonally. So I'm pretty comfortable and happy with that. It's not maybe as accurate with where the shadow is for her, but it is accurate where the shadow is for here. So that is one option here. But let's talk about what else we might be able to be doing with this. Now, one thing I didn't mention over here is that you might need a little bit of extra exposure in here. This might not be enough. If you need more, you can use something like a space light or a lantern, and I would use it on our left of the camera so that it kind of is motivated by the light source that we already have, and that can fill the space in a little bit more. But we're trying to not fill in those shadows too much because we want that contrast. So we're playing a delicate balance of getting enough exposure while also making sure that we retain that contrast. Now over in this option, we could do also something like use a Fresnel on a flood. This would also depend on the size of your space. The Fresnel here would make these shadows sharper and definitely get these edges really well and not have that be filled in at all by, the light wrapping because of the octabox. So this would definitely be less spread overall, but harder light. Because you wouldn't be getting the same wrapping with the Fresnel, I would say that using a space light here would probably be useful. Now, both of these will give you different but kind of approximately similar results with, the details being different. This one, like I said, will need you to be able to go a little bit further back generally if you want to get that circular nature here. But there's one thing that when I was thinking about this that I thought would be really fun, and this is different from what it actually is here. And if you don't have either a Fresnel or an octabox, you could do something like this with a light panel. It just depends on where your position is and what you're willing to sacrifice. You would probably want to have a diffusion on your light panel, kind of depending what kind you have, but having a diffuser on it so you don't get funky multi shadows. But that would be something that could work. You just want to make sure the position of the lamp is able to get this shadow and her shadow sort of. But I'm focusing on the room shadow more, and then understanding that what we are sacrificing or increasing is the wrap around on her face to get that Rembrandt triangle. The octabox has more wrap, the Fresnel has almost no wrap. A light panel would be somewhere in between as a smaller source, but with more, individual tiny sources. So, there's just some choices we can make there. I'd probably prefer either the Fresnel or the octabox. For this level of contrast, I probably would prefer the Fresnel for how I often light things, and especially if I'm going to be doing a lot of close-ups and I want to be efficient, I might want to go with the octabox, even though that sacrifices a little bit of that kind of harsh edge contrast in the wide. And also, like I talk about all the time, if you move that octabox further back, you will get harder shadows again because of its relative distance to the subject. So now I want to talk about something kind of fun that I think could happen here and work well for this image that isn't explicitly shown. So that would be going here and actually having another light source. The other light source coming from the left side of the camera and creating a red light that we cast right behind the couch before we get to the corner to create this red glow, and just, we're gelling this light and it's going to be making this even more red and to bring up the red saturation in the room itself. And so we can kind of make this shape with that. And by having some light that's specifically falling here, as long as we kind of feather the edge, it doesn't really make it incredibly noticeable and gives maybe some edge contrast to the couch as well and some more shape to it. And so we can do this and then it will reflect more red. So when we have the shadows over here, they'll have a little bit of almost like a red filler, red tinge to it, which I think would be really fun, as well as just adding some more red saturation to the whole image. So this is just something that I think would be kind of a fun addition to this shot. With this, you might not need the space light as much. You might be able to turn it down or entirely remove it. And then kind of lastly, with any of these, I would say that to help with that contrast, bringing in some wag flag or other types of negative fill would be certainly useful. Just trying to bring down the exposure on that far side of the face, just right here, by having some negative fill just out of frame on the right side, I think would be something that would be useful. It's not entirely required. It would just help a little bit with bringing down some of the reflected light. Now, like I said, in this one, if we are going to potentially have some of this red light be reflected into the face and have those shadows just be a little bit more red tinged, this is probably less important, but it is something that is possible to do. And I think that would help, overall increase the contrast, because depending on what color this wall is or what the ceiling is, we're going to be having a lot more light bouncing around, and we can, cut that down to improve our overall contrast. So this one is not incredibly complex in terms of a lighting setup, although what we're really needing to focus on here is how do we get the right shadow for us and our project on her face? How do we make sure that this is kind of looking like a window light? I would always say a Fresnel looks more like a window light, while an Octabox maybe looks like it's through curtains. So I'm probably leaning Fresnel here. And then how do we make sure this red is distinct? And to me, that is shooting more red light against this wall. And we're going to leave this other wall that's kind of behind the fireplace here, and maybe getting a little bit less light directly on it. If the window is, kind of behind the camera, behind the lights right here, just getting that some more red. And so this is kind of my favorite. This would be, in my opinion, ideal. This is, what I think would be probably most accurate to the painting. And then this one right here would be maybe a little bit cheaper, depending on what kind of Octabox you're using. These two are going to be still similar. The Octabox will make sure that her shadow is less apparent right here because of the manipulation the artist did. The Fresnel will have a more of a harsh shadow there. It doesn't necessarily matter all that much, but these are just, 3 different options for how to light a painting like this. Ultimately, your color grade is going to be very important here. Trying to get those reds saturated but not overexposed will be something that you have to balance lighting wise, and probably will take the most skill here, so that when you get to your grade, you can have these be lovely saturated reds, like, a painting can have saturated colors in a way that is more difficult in photography because we have less artistic control, outside of our, digital editing room and those kinds of things. We're not choosing the exact tones of all of the objects in the room in the way that a painter can. And so really here, I think lighting for a focus on saturation, and then understanding that this image will probably come together in your grade, is important. And each one leaves a lot of flexibility for your own personal preferences and how that would go into the story. But, we're just continuing our exercise in seeing how light falls on things, seeing how it takes form and shape and color, and how it's modified by the space that it's in, whether that is through diffusion, through curtains, the sun, bouncing off walls, whatever. Really, I don't think I've done a painting yet that has walls this distinctively colored. And so it's kind of fun and a little bit different. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you want to get these filmmaker template tools, head over to my Patreon. That direct link to the free lighting diagram is down below. You don't even have to join, but if you do want to join, I'd love to have you. Like I said at the beginning, I am trying to get to 100 free and paid members for these cinematography videos, including my lighting diagrams and my regular videos as well. And one of the big perks of joining on Patreon is that you get to vote on upcoming video topics for my regular cinematography videos, as well as upcoming lighting diagrams for paintings that you are more interested in seeing a lighting diagram for. If you want to pick up any of the types of equipment that we've been talking about in this video, I have affiliate links down in the video's description. Those help support the channel at no extra cost to you. I do also have a Ko-fi and a Buy Me a Coffee tip jars as well, if those are services that you use. Remember this week to take care of yourself and others. Please wear a mask in public to help reduce the transmission of preventable illnesses. That's really, really important right now. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful day ahead of you. Peace.